The woman took care of her boss for 20 years, but before she left, she was called back by his son.
Hello everyone, enjoy these relaxing moments while you watch.
A gray, drizzling sky hung over New York. Rain fell softly on the old, moss-covered roof tiles. Mr. Williams' funeral ended quickly, like a mere formality. No music, no ceremony, just a few old acquaintances, a few former colleagues standing in silence for less than 10 minutes. Black umbrellas quietly opened, then closed again without a word. Wind rustled through the pine trees on the edge of the cemetery, adding an eerie chill to the air. Rose stood quietly behind the gravestone, her thin, dry hands clasped tightly, her shoulders trembling beneath a faded black coat. She didn't cry. She had run out of tears over the past 3 years at her former employer's bedside, the man she had once called "Sir" with deep respect and something more, something she had never spoken aloud. Andrew stood opposite her, only a few feet away, but it felt like an ocean divided them. Designer coat, polished leather shoes, eyes cold as ice. He hadn't glanced at Rose once since landing in New York for his father's funeral. He stood tall, aloof, as if the funeral itself was just another formality he wanted to get over with as quickly as possible. As soon as the burial ended, Andrew turned and walked to the car. Rose stayed a moment longer. Her eyes fixed on the words etched into the gravestone, William Carter, 1946 to 2025. Rest in peace. No flowers. No goodbyes. Just damp earth and a stifled breath caught in her throat. That afternoon, the grand mansion on Park Avenue stood silent, like an abandoned house. Andrew entered, pulled off his scarf, and threw it carelessly onto the couch. Rose was still in the kitchen, finishing up the daily pot of tea, a habit she had kept for 3 years, brewing it at exactly 5 p.m. every day for her employer, even after he could no longer drink it. No need for that anymore, Andrew said coldly from the kitchen doorway. Rose looked up, her hands trembling slightly. I was just. I don't need an explanation, Andrew cut her off. I've said it already, as of today, you no longer need to do anything in this house. Silence. Only the soft tapping of rain on the glass. Rose clutched the teapot tightly. I understand. But I'll tidy up the master's room before I leave. No need, Andrew said, enunciating every word. I'll call a professional cleaning service. This house is not a nursing home. That sentence cut like a blade. Rose froze. She said nothing. She simply turned and returned to her small room behind the kitchen, the one she had lived in for over 20 years. She began to pack. Her belongings were few, some old clothes, a wool scarf William had knit for her that first winter, and a small photo album hidden under the mattress. Andrew stood in the living room, phone in hand. Yes, Mrs. Navarro. I need the entire house cleaned within 2 days. Especially my father's bedroom and the area behind the kitchen. I want it spotless, like no one ever lived there. He paused to listen to the voice on the other end. No, don't keep anything. If there are photos or keepsakes, throw them all out. Outside, the rain grew heavier. Upstairs, Rose folded the last shirt. She sat down, resting her hand on the worn suitcase. Once more, her gaze drifted to the hallway where William's room stood. She didn't dare approach, only looked from a distance, as if afraid of disturbing the rest of the dead. The door opened. Andrew stood there, keys in hand. How long will you need? I'll leave tonight. The sooner, the better. At dusk, Rose dragged her heavy suitcase out the back door. Andrew didn't see her off. He stood on the second-floor balcony, expressionless, watching the frail woman step out the gate. When she reached the front steps, Andrew tossed the house keys to the ground. The metallic clink echoed on the stone floor. Keep them. In case you forget, this house is not a nursing home. Rose bent down, picked up the keys, but she didn't keep them. She placed them on the windowsill and walked away without a word. Andrew stayed there, watching her until she disappeared behind the darkening trees. In a small bar on the corner of Fifth Avenue, Andrew sat with Emily, a young attorney and an old college friend. "You really kicked her out?" Emily frowned, sipping her white wine. "She had no reason to stay," Andrew shrugged. "I don't need someone playing the devoted angel anymore. Her part is over." Emily stared at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "She took care of your father. For 3 years. Alone. That was her job. She was paid." Andrew slammed his glass down. "Don't give me this sentimental crap. Andrew. I think you're blaming the wrong person. She didn't stay out of loyalty. She stayed because she thought she'd get a share. Waiting for him to die like a guard over a pile of gold." He scoffed. "You know what my mother said before she left?" Emily said nothing. Andrew whispered, as if reciting a mantra. "He betrayed me, for that maid." Late that night, Rose entered a shabby boarding house near Jackson Heights, a rundown neighborhood filled with immigrants and cheap rent. Her room was barely 10 square meters. A single bed, a rickety wooden cabinet, and a window facing the cracked wall of the building next door. "Welcome back, Miss Rose," said Martha, the elderly landlady, a nearly 70-year-old widow. "You're back already? You look so pale." "The funeral's over," Rose replied softly. "The son, was he kind?" Martha asked, her eyes scanning Rose's face. Rose paused, then shook her head. "There's nothing left. I just need a place to sleep, Mrs. Martha. I'll pay weekly like before." That's fine. Your old room's still waiting. I made some soup, let me warm it up." Rose managed a faint smile, but her eyes were empty. Night fell. Andrew lay on the king-sized bed in the mansion, scrolling through old messages. No word from his father. No word from the maid. Just the final photo he'd taken at the airport and a shot of the cold gravestone. He opened the liquor cabinet, poured a full glass. His mother's voice echoed in his head. "He betrayed me, for that maid." He shut his eyes. The rain kept falling. In the master bedroom, Andrew opened his father's old cabinet. Inside were a few notebooks, a rusted pocket watch, and a brown wool scarf. He picked it up, then flung it hard to the floor like it had burned him. "My father wasted his life, for her," he muttered. The yellow light cast his shadow long and crooked on the ceiling. In his mind, the image of an 8-year-old boy came flooding back, shouting, scornful eyes, the collapse of a family that might have been whole. "Don't touch him." A woman's voice echoed through the old staircase. Susan, Andrew's mother, was still young, beautiful, and fiery like a torch back then. Every step she took shook the whole house. Little Andrew was burning with fever, soaked in sweat, resting in Rose's arms as she gently pressed a cool towel to his forehead, whispering softly to soothe him. Then Susan stormed in like thunder, grabbed Rose's arm, and yanked Andrew away so roughly his head knocked against the wall. "What gives you the right to touch my son? He's not yours." "Ma'am Susan, he's burning up." "Shut up. You shameless woman. I come home and see you cradling my son, it makes me sick." Andrew remembered Rose then. She didn't fight back, just bowed her head in silence, hands trembling. But the boy didn't understand. His young mind recorded only one thing: mother was furious because of her. That memory haunted Andrew to this day. In his mind, Rose was a name never to be spoken, a stain that wouldn't fade. He never told anyone, not even Emily, his closest friend, that since childhood he had called her something else in his mind, that woman. Not Miss Rose, not Nanny, nothing warm. Just that woman. A title of coldness and contempt. "You never wondered what really made your mother leave?" Emily asked one rainy afternoon, as they sat in an old bar in Greenwich Village. Andrew drained his glass, then sneered. "The real reason? I've heard enough. She said it herself. That woman was my mother's best friend. Then she seduced my father behind her back. The result? My mother left. I grew up with a man emotionally crippled, and a maid who hovered around my father like a ghost. Emily shook her head. Did it ever occur to you that adults have their own pain too? I don't care. I live with the consequences of their choices, Andrew growled. And that woman was the reason. She's not innocent. She stayed behind to enjoy what was left of my family. At the rundown boarding house, Rose sat silently under the dim yellow light. Mrs. Martha, the landlady, brought over a plate of stewed beans. Eat something, Rose. You look like a ghost. Thank you, Martha. I'm not hungry. Still thinking about Mr. William? Rose stayed silent, eyes fixed on the small window. She didn't answer. Martha sat down, sighing. I miss him. He used to be well known around the Upper East Side. Everyone respected him. But the son. Don't blame him, Rose said softly. He only believes what he's always heard. Heard? Or had it drilled into him? Martha scoffed. That kid nearly died of a fever once. Who stayed up all night wiping his sweat? I remember, you carried him to my room in the middle of the night when he was seizing. Rose tightened her hands. And then what? His mother slapped you. I saw it with my own eyes. That shame outsiders could see it too. But he didn't, Rose whispered. In his eyes, I was the woman who stole his father. Martha paused. She was older than Rose by a few years, yet in that moment she looked decades younger. You don't owe me an explanation. I know. But if you stay silent forever, people will think you deserve what you got. Sometimes, the truth is something no one wants to hear. The next day, Andrew returned to his father's house with one goal only, to wipe away the memories, as he had told the cleaning company. Make it quick. I don't want to smell her anymore, he said to Philip, the cleaning crew supervisor. Philip frowned slightly, confused. The maid? I thought she lived here for a long time. So what if she did? No one is irreplaceable, Andrew said coldly. Philip said nothing more, just signaled his co-workers to begin. Andrew unlocked Rose's bedroom himself. A whiff of mothballs and cheap soap hit his nose. The room was plain, clean, almost devoid of anything personal. A worn wardrobe, a small bed with a dark blanket, a few old books with torn covers. He flung open the wardrobe and searched through every drawer. In the bottom drawer, under a pile of old clothes, was a pale yellow envelope. Inside, a photograph. 3 young people, smiling brightly on a beach. William, still youthful, his hair not yet gray. Susan, her hair voluminous, wearing a white dress. And in the middle Rose, smiling, her arms around both of them. On the back, handwritten words still visible, Summer '86, friends forever. Andrew froze. No way. They were friends. But his first feeling wasn't surprise. It was rage. He stomped on the photo, grinding it under his heel. One corner crumpled, torn. But then, as if rethinking it, he bent down, picked up the pieces, tucked them into a fresh envelope, and put it in his jacket pocket. Trying to hide the past, he muttered. I'll make her face it. That evening, Andrew showed up at the shabby boarding house. The hallway was dark. Outside, a few children played in puddles. A man of Ecuadorian descent was yelling at his wife near the window. He knocked. Rose opened the door. For a moment, their eyes met. Come outside. I'm not stepping into this garbage dump, Andrew snapped. Martha stuck her head out from the door next door and scolded, watch your mouth, young man. This is a boarding house, not a battlefield. Stay out of this, Andrew barked. Rose stepped out, gently closing the door behind her. What do you want? Andrew pulled out the envelope, opened it, and threw the photo on the ground at her feet. Explain. Friendship? Or was it a setup from the start? Rose bent down, picked up the photo, and gently brushed the dirt off with her sleeve. Andrew hissed, "My father died because of you. You stayed to leech off him, to inherit. Too bad he left no will for you." Rose said nothing. After a few seconds, she pulled a small cloth from her pocket. Inside it was a tiny envelope, which she handed to him. "If there's still any humanity in you, go see the person you need to see." Andrew stared at the envelope, then snatched it, stuffing it roughly into his pocket. "You think this cheap trick will make me forgive you?" Rose didn't reply. Her eyes held no anger, no resentment, only emptiness. That look was what kept Andrew awake all night. The next morning in New York, pale golden sunlight spread across the rooftops. The Carter mansion stood alone among the upscale blocks, like a relic abandoned by time. Andrew entered Rose's room for the second time in 3 days. Philip, the cleaning supervisor, looked up from a pile of things. "Mr. Carter, are you sure you want to keep all this stuff? We can take care of it for you." "No," Andrew replied coldly. "I'll clean it myself." Philip shrugged and motioned for his team to leave. Once the door closed behind them, Andrew locked it, pulled the photo he had stomped on from his pocket. Despite the creases and stains, the image was still clear. William in the middle, arms around Rose and Susan, all three of them smiling brightly. In the background, blue sea, golden sand. He threw the photo on the table and started rifling through Rose's nightstand. Top drawer, painkillers, worn books, pencil-scribbled notes. Second drawer, old handkerchiefs, sewing kits, scraps of cloth. Third drawer, a small wooden box with a rusted lock. Inside were a few loose photos, old birthday cards, and a yellowed letter. Andrew opened it. It was William's handwriting. "Rose. Thank you for staying, when everyone else turned away. Without you, I don't know where I would have ended up. If one day Andrew is old enough to understand, please give him this photo." Andrew crumpled the letter, his voice hoarse. "Leaving love letters, huh?" His face flushed purple. A surge of betrayal and humiliation bubbled up inside him. Every little detail felt like a bloodless wound carving into his pride. He grabbed the wooden box and slammed it to the floor. Crack! A hidden compartment beneath the lining popped open. Inside, another photo. This one of the Carter house before its renovations, with 3 people standing in front. Rose in a blue dress, William holding a wine glass, and Susan seated on the steps, head slightly tilted. Andrew sneered. Best friends? Or a 3-way conspiracy? A whole play from the start. He took both photos, pulled out his phone, and made a call. "Emily. I need you. Now. Come to the house. There's something we need to clear up." Less than an hour later, Emily arrived. She hadn't even taken off her scarf when Andrew tossed the 2 photos at her. "Look at them." Emily froze. "What's going on?" "Her. Rose. And my mother. Best friends? Best friends don't steal each other's husbands, do they?" Andrew said through gritted teeth. "I found a whole pile of old photos. Handwritten letters. My father thanking her for staying when everyone turned away. It was all a setup." "You're letting your imagination run wild," Emily said as she sat down. "Did Rose ever say anything about all this?" "She's always silent. Plays mute. I showed her the photo. Wanted to see what she'd say." He pulled the picture from his pocket and tossed it on the table. "The result? Not a word. Maybe she didn't want to dig up the past. Ever think of that?" Andrew slammed the table. "Didn't want to? Or too scared to be exposed?" Emily was quiet for a moment, then asked slowly. Did it ever cross your mind that maybe things didn't happen the way you think? What if it was your mother, who lied to you from the very beginning? Don't bring my mother into this, Andrew cut her off. She left because she was betrayed. That's what she told me. Maybe, it's time you go find her yourself. The next morning, he returned to Rose's boarding house. The room was empty. The door was locked. Inside, nothing was left. The wooden bed, the old wool scarf, the suitcase, everything was gone. He ran downstairs to find Martha. Where is she? Martha replied flatly, watering her plants. She moved out the morning before last. Didn't leave an address. Just said if you came back, give you this. She handed him an old envelope, no name on it. Andrew opened it. Inside was a small piece of paper and an old photo, 5-year-old Andrew asleep on Rose's lap, her arms wrapped around him as if holding the whole world. On the note, in simple handwriting. I forgive you. Even if you hate me, I've always wished for your happiness just like your father did. You were the smallest light of my life. Andrew's hands trembled. He dropped onto the wooden bench outside. The sun beat down, harsh and unrelenting. He cried not in sobs, but in strangled, soundless tears, tears that felt like they'd been trapped inside for years. Andrew stepped out of Penn Station, sweat soaking the back of his shirt under the sweltering southern heat. But the simmering anger inside him was even hotter than the sun. He held the note Rose had left in the last envelope, just a simple address, no name, Elm Street, Williamsburg District. The street was crowded. Balconies bloomed with flowers. Scooters beeped as they passed. The scent of coffee from a nearby cafe mingled with laughter in the air. None of it mattered to Andrew. Apartment 17. A modern high-rise. Automatic gates. He rang for Unit 4B. I'm here to see Susan Carter. A woman's voice crackled through the intercom. Who is this? Andrew. Silence. Then a beep. The door unlocked. The apartment was cool from the air conditioning. The scent of Chanel No. 5 hit him instantly. The decor was tasteful, but messy dresses flung over chairs, a glass of red wine on the table, an ashtray filled with lipstick-stained cigarette butts. Susan walked out of the bedroom in a black silk nightgown, barefoot, toenails painted red. Her eyes still carried traces of makeup she hadn't removed. You actually came, she smirked. Andrew stood still. Are you always like this? You disappeared for over a decade, never once tried to find me, and now you act like you were expecting a delivery. Susan didn't respond. She walked into the kitchen, poured 2 glasses of orange juice, and returned. You didn't call. I didn't have time to prepare. She handed him a glass. Andrew didn't take it. He sat on the white leather sofa, eyes locked on her. I went to see her. Rose. Susan laughed, hands on her hips. Did you? And did you come here hoping I'd say what? That she's a witch. That I'm sorry for letting her raise you. You said Dad betrayed you, for her. Yes. She sat across from him. Because he chose a country made with no education over a woman of equal class. You left. On your own, Andrew growled. Susan raised an eyebrow, swirled her wine, and laughed like it was a cheap joke. Still so naive. Yes, I left because I was exhausted. But also because I knew I could never win him back, not when he looked at Rose the way he never once looked at me. Andrew was speechless. Then why blame her? Because it's easier than blaming myself. Susan shrugged. When people fail, they need someone to blame. Rose was good but foolish. She stayed, cared for him, gave up her youth. And in the end, she was still the help. And you? Andrew asked. Do you regret anything? Susan laughed sharply, filled with scorn. Regret? No. I've had freedom, men, money. And Rose? Where is she now? A cheap boarding room? Eating instant noodles? To the world, she may seem noble, but deep down she's just a fool. Andrew clenched his fists until his knuckles turned white. You let me grow up in hatred. You let me despise the only person who stayed. The only one who cared for me, and for Dad. You knew, didn't you? You had your choices, Andrew. Susan exhaled smoke. Don't pin it all on me. If you really want to understand, ask yourself, why were you so willing to believe? He stepped closer. Because you were all I had. Susan looked up, meeting his gaze, fury and pain mingling in his eyes. I'm a person too. Susan snapped. I'm the one who chose to survive. I walked away from it all. She's the one who lingered rotting in the past. She stayed, for Dad. For me. You're just romanticizing things. Andrew turned away, disgusted. I should have known. You haven't changed. You never felt remorse. Susan walked slowly to the liquor cabinet and poured herself another drink. Her voice soft. There are people, Andrew, who were born to forgive. And there are people like me born to survive. He said nothing. Just walked to the door. As his hand touched the knob, Susan called out. Don't look for her again. People like her were born to be left behind. On the night train back to New York, Andrew sat alone. The darkness outside flashed by like torn-up masks. He laid his head on the small table. He didn't cry. There were no tears left. His mind was a mess. His father a man who aged silently. His mother a beautiful woman cold as stone. And Rose the woman he had only ever referred to as, that woman. Susan's words echoed in his head. Born to be left behind. Andrew felt like the embodiment of betrayal, selfishness, and misunderstanding. A child wedged between two generations' tragedies. A boy raised on adult anger and the absence of truth. The train arrived at Grand Central Terminal at 2 a.m. He dragged his feet out of the station. No taxi. No return to the mansion. He just walked, nowhere in particular. New York was eerily quiet that night. Andrew walked from Grand Central Terminal all the way to the Upper East Side, head bowed, his shadow stretching long under the cold yellow streetlights. No cars, no voices, just the sound of his shoes against the pavement and his own breath, fast, heavy, as if the world itself was crushing his chest. He didn't go back to the mansion. Instead, he stopped in front of the old boarding house in Jackson Heights, the same place where 3 days ago, he'd stood and hurled words like knives at Rose. The door was still shut. The room, as Martha had said, was cleared out. No one remained. Andrew sank onto the front steps. He had read the letter Rose left him over and over again. The handwriting shaky, the ink faded, as if the writer's hands had trembled. I forgive you. Even if you hate me, I've always wished for your happiness just like your father did. You were the smallest light of my life. He pulled the photo from his pocket, a 5-year-old boy asleep in the lap of a maid, her arms around him with a kind of love that had no name. The photo was old, faded, but he could still see her eyes closed, tired, but tender. Andrew brushed the photo with his fingers. Memories, long buried, stirred inside him. She ruined my family. That line, the one he had repeated hundreds of times to himself, to friends, to lovers, to colleagues, now sounded like a cruel joke. Rose. The woman he had called only that woman for over a decade. She had lived beside him, cared for his father, cleaned every bedpan, wiped every bloodstain, changed bandages every night, endured every cold, contemptuous look and said nothing. That silence, he used to hate it. To him, it had always felt like a kind of fake submission, a performance meant to make others uncomfortable. But now he understood, it wasn't because she had nothing to say. It was because, no one ever wanted to listen. He remembered the years when his father began to lose control of half his body. Every time he came home from work, the house reeked of medication and antibiotics. Rose never complained, never cried out, she just stood there like a shadow. Once, he'd walked into the kitchen and found her sitting alone by the sink, shoulders shaking. He had thought, more theatrics. Playing the fragile old woman to win pity. Now he knew it wasn't acting. It was exhaustion, repressed until it leaked out as silent tears, tears she dared not shed too loudly, afraid he would hear, afraid of being misunderstood, just like all those years. He shot up, slammed his fist against the door of the boarding house. Bang! Bang! His arm turned red. But no one opened the door. Behind him, Martha's voice rang out, dry and sharp. She's not here anymore. Andrew turned, his face pale. I don't know what to do. Martha stepped onto the porch, holding a scarf in her arms. Her gaze was cold. The first time you came here, you cursed her. Humiliated her in front of all the neighbors. Called her manipulative, fake. You didn't see her face. No tears. No protest. Just her head bowed because she knew every word you said came from a heart that had been poisoned. Andrew choked on his own breath. Did she leave anything for me? What you needed you threw away, Martha said, turning to go back inside. But if you still want to find her, then start by digging through your own memory. That night, Andrew returned to the mansion. He opened every drawer, every corner, as if searching for something he had lost long ago. The house was dead silent. His father's old piano sat untouched, blanketed in dust. The wedding photo of William and Susan lay face down. The scarf Rose had wrapped around his father that first winter was still in the closet. He grabbed it, clenched it tightly, brought it to his nose. The smell of cheap soap. The scent of memory. Andrew walked to his father's room, a room he had barely entered in the past 3 years. He opened the door. The hospital bed remained. The worn sheets. The wooden chair beside it where Rose used to sit all night. Everything covered in dust. He sat down in the chair and closed his eyes. And the final image returned, clearer than ever. His father, William, lay on the bed, breath shallow, eyes clouded white. Rose sat beside him, holding his hand. And at that moment, William whispered, "Thank you, don't leave me." He had witnessed that scene. But back then, all he could hear in his head was his mother's voice. He betrayed me, for that maid. So he had turned away. Ignored it. Never once asked, why would a dying man hold the hand of his maid and cry? Never once asked, why she stayed when no one asked her to. Emily arrived the next afternoon. She stepped into the living room to find Andrew sitting on the floor, hair disheveled, dark circles under his eyes, surrounded by photos, letters, scarves, and old watches, all things that once belonged to Rose. "Did you find her?" Emily asked softly. Andrew shook his head. "Too late. She's gone. No one knows where. No phone. No address." Emily sat beside him. She saw the framed photo of 5-year-old Andrew. This is the photo she carried with her for decades. Andrew's voice broke. "I called her, that woman. My whole childhood, I never once called her Miss Rose or anything like that. Just scorned her. Accused her. Lived my life in a haze." He handed Emily the letter Rose had left. "Read it. That kind of person, and I threw stones at her." Emily read slowly. Then sat in silence for a moment. "You're not the only one who was wrong, Andrew. But now it's time for you to pay the price." He clenched his fists. "I'm ready. Then start by finding her. Don't sit here waiting for a miracle." Andrew looked up. And for the first time, there was a flicker of something in his eyes, fragile, threadbare, but unmistakable. Hope. That night, Andrew opened a city map. There was only one red dot marked on the note. Rose had once scribbled for him a nursing home in Albany, a place she had vaguely mentioned while talking about old friends from her youth. He circled it. Then stood up. This time. I won't be too late. Early morning. The sky was overcast. Andrew stepped off the interstate bus, his breath misting in the cool Highland air. In his hand, a crumpled note with the address of the Grace Haven Nursing Center, nestled on the outskirts of a quiet suburb mentioned only once by Rose back when his father was still alive. A taxi dropped him at the rusted iron gate. Andrew stepped in. At the front desk sat a middle-aged woman, full figure, graying curls, glasses slipping down her nose, busy writing in a logbook. "Good morning," he nodded. I'm looking for Rose Walker." The woman looked up, briefly surprised. "Mrs. Walker? She stayed here for a short time. But she's not here anymore." Andrew froze. "Do you know where she went?" "She left last week. Didn't say why. But she left something behind, just in case someone ever came looking. I didn't think anyone actually would." She opened a drawer and pulled out an old envelope. Andrew reached for it. His heart pounded. On the front, a single word. Andrew. He opened it. Inside was a small photo, the one he now knew by heart, the 5-year-old boy asleep on Rose's lap. But this time, it was framed in a simple wooden frame, clean and neat. At the bottom was a folded note, the handwriting shaky. "I forgive you. Not because you realized your mistake. Not because I'm noble. But because I never held hatred for you. Your father once said, if he can love, he can repent. I believe that. And I still believe. Rose." Andrew placed the photo gently on the desk. His throat tightened. The woman behind the counter watched him and sighed. She was quiet. Never complained. But every evening, she'd sit outside holding that photo in her lap. Like it was a part of her. Andrew asked in a low voice, "No one knows where she went?" She said, "I never stay anywhere long. If people don't want me to stay, I won't cling." He looked down at the note, steadying his breath. "Do you remember any names? Friends, old boarding houses, anything?" "Nothing. She didn't take mail. Never called anyone. Always, alone." That afternoon, Andrew wandered aimlessly through Albany. Mind blank. No destination. His thoughts looped endlessly. Rose's eyes on the night they parted, her trembling hand offering the letter, her fragile back disappearing behind the fence. He called Emily. "Did you find her?" Her voice was tense. "No. She's gone." "So what now?" "Now all I have, is what she left behind." "What will you do?" Andrew was silent. Then finally answered. "I don't know. I thought if I could find her. I could apologize. I could kneel. I could call her Mother. But I was too late." Back in New York, the mansion still felt like a tomb. Andrew threw open every window. The afternoon sun streamed in, landing on the photograph he'd placed in the center of the living room, the old photo of Rose, carefully restored from the torn pieces he had once stomped on. Next to it, a small frame that read, "You were the smallest light of my life." He sat down on the couch, buried his head in his hands, eyes wide open. Inside his mind were the echoes of the things he had said. "You stole my father. You stayed behind to go after the inheritance. I don't need your pity." An empty room. A forgiveness never heard in person. And an absence that could never be mended. That night, Andrew went to Martha's house in Jackson Heights. She was watering her plants on the porch. "What are you still looking for here?" "I want to know." The last time you saw Rose, what did she say? Martha wiped her hands on her apron, gave him a glance. She left quietly. Left the room spotless, and placed a single wild daisy on the table. Andrew lowered his head. Did she say anything about me? Only once. She asked me if I thought you could forgive yourself. He bit his lip, his voice raspy. And what did you say? I told her, no one can forgive themselves if they still believe they were right. Late at night, Andrew sat in the mansion's library, going through his father's old notebooks. Among the stacks of papers, he found a draft of a will unsigned and not notarized. The last handwritten line read, I don't have much. But if I could, I'd want the small room at the end of the hall to always belong to Rose, the one who stayed when no one else did. An unofficial will. But enough to show Andrew whom his father trusted most. And Andrew Carter had shredded that trust with his own arrogance. The next morning, Emily stopped by. You haven't eaten in 2 days. I'm not hungry. You can't keep going like this. I deserve it. Emily sat beside him and handed him a folder. What's this? A list of elderly housekeepers in New York who never received retirement benefits. I thought, if you still want to do something for her, start with the people like her. Andrew opened the folder, flipping through the pages. You think I can make up for what I did? No. But at the very least, you can stop hurting others. That night, Andrew placed Rose's letter next to his bed, beneath the old framed photo. He lay there, staring at the ceiling, whispering. Rose. No one answered. Only the wind slipped through the window, like a lullaby without words. October winds in New York were dry and cold. Andrew sat alone in his office, piles of paperwork stacked around him, but none of it held his attention. Calls from partners went unanswered. Meetings were postponed indefinitely. Only one thought remained in his mind. Find Rose. 3 weeks had passed since the day he left Grace Haven Nursing Center in Albany, clutching the photo frame. No one knew where she had gone. No ID records, no medical files, no living friends. But that didn't stop Andrew. He contacted shelters across the country, posted information on elder care forums, even asked Emily to help search. On day 24, as he sat in his car, eyes closed from exhaustion, his phone buzzed. Emily's name lit up on the screen. Hello. There's been a report, Emily said quickly. A social worker in Sonoma County says they've found Rose. She was recently transferred to Hopewell House nursing home outside Albany. Andrew's heart dropped. Are you sure? Yes. They said she collapsed in a park. They found an old framed photo and a note with your mansion's address in her pocket. He leapt from the car, voice shaking. Send me the address. I'm leaving now. That afternoon, Andrew arrived at Hopewell House, a small white and yellow facility surrounded by ancient cypress trees. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic. He walked to the reception desk and asked for her by name. The nurse on duty, a woman named Lucy Martin, nodded. Mrs. Walker? Yes, she's in room 11. But what? Lucy hesitated. She's not well. Her breathing is weak. Her mental state's unstable. And she hasn't spoken to anyone. She just stares out the window. Andrew nodded, gripping the strap of his bag. I need to see her. I'm family. Lucy studied him for a moment, then pointed the way. Room 11. A small room, pale green walls, single bed, the window open just enough for the breeze to stir the curtains. Rose lay there. Hair completely white, face pale, eyes gazing out at the garden. Andrew stepped in, stopping 2 meters from the bed. He didn't speak at first. Just stood there, heart pounding. She didn't turn. He inhaled deeply, then spoke, voice hoarse. It's me. Andrew. No response. He took a step closer, voice trembling. I came looking for you. I searched everywhere. I'm sorry. Rose slowly turned her head. Her eyes blinked once. And then, like a soft miracle, her lips moved barely audible. Andrew. He dropped to his knees beside the bed, clutching her frail, thin hand. Every wrinkle, every scar, every raised knuckle etched the guilt he carried. I'm sorry. I lived in blindness for so long. I did the worst thing, to the one person who never deserved it. Tears fell, soaking her hand. Rose didn't speak again. But she squeezed his hand weak, but real. Lucy stood at the door, then quietly pulled it closed, leaving them in a moment untouched by the world. The next day, Andrew returned to the center with a private car, finalized paperwork, and a simple request. She's not a maid anymore. From now on, she's part of my family. Lucy looked surprised, but didn't object. Are you sure? She's still very weak. I'll take care of her, Andrew said firmly. And I'll care for the past I once trampled on. He brought Rose back to the Carter mansion in the same car he once refused her entry to. But this time, he opened the door and lifted her in both arms. Rose looked at the house as if revisiting a grave of memories. Andrew bowed his head. I can't change the past. But I can make sure you're honored in the present. Rose looked at him, her eyes shimmering. She nodded softly. The following day, Emily stopped by. She walked into the mansion and saw something she'd never expected. Andrew in the kitchen slicing fruit, Rose sitting by the window with a small book in hand. Emily raised her eyebrows. This is the Carter mansion. Andrew smiled faintly for the first time in months. It's our home now. Rose turned around, smiling gently. Emily, beautiful girl. Still coming by? Emily stepped forward and hugged her. I had to come back. I've never called you anything other than the kindest soul in my best friend's life. Rose laughed, a hint of life returning to her voice. Emily pulled Andrew into the garden, whispering. You've really changed. Andrew nodded. Slowly, but in time. You know, Emily glanced back toward the house, she cried a lot. But not because she was hurt. She cried because she thought, you'd never grow up. Andrew gently clenched his fist. Well, her son finally did. That night, Rose sat on the balcony, gazing up at the sky. Andrew brought her a cup of chamomile tea, the only drink she ever liked after dinner. You once said you liked New York sunsets more than any other cities. I did, Rose replied softly. Because they're beautiful, and sad. Andrew sat down beside her. I want to change that. I want you to see that things can be not just sad but peaceful. Rose looked at him, her eyes full of tenderness, then asked. And what will you do with your mistakes? Andrew was quiet for a while, then said. I'll make amends through action. Not just for you. But for everyone who's ever been forgotten. Rose gave a small nod. That's enough. 3 months later, New York glowed in the spring sunlight. The orange trees lining the streets were blooming with white blossoms, their gentle scent drifting through the historic blocks. Inside the Carter mansion, light streamed through the windows and fell onto a framed photo on the living room table, 5-year-old Andrew asleep in Rose's lap. Next to it, a hand-painted portrait from Andrew's memory, Rose, smiling. You made me look too beautiful, Rose said, sitting in an armchair by the fireplace. Andrew smiled as he placed a cup of tea in front of her. I just tried to capture the light you always carried. Light? She raised an eyebrow. Yes. He sat down. The kind of light that shines quietly, that no one notices, until it's gone. Rose was silent for a moment, then looked out the window. You've changed a lot, Andrew. He nodded gently. I'm still here, because you never gave up on me. Rose didn't speak. But she squeezed his hand. That afternoon, in a small conference hall at New York City Hall, Emily stepped up to the microphone, her voice clear and steady. Dear friends, we're gathered here today to launch the Eternal Rose Fund, a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting elderly housekeepers with no retirement, no family, and no place to call home. The seats were packed. Volunteers, social workers, seniors, and even reporters from the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, and NBC were in attendance. Andrew stepped onto the stage. The clicks of cameras filled the air. He looked down at the front row. Rose sat in the center, dressed neatly in a brown dress, holding a small picture frame in her lap, her eyes lit with a light from long ago. Thank you all for being here, Andrew began, voice calm. I used to be ungrateful. I lived in the delusion that the quiet people by my side didn't matter. He paused, took a breath. I had a mother who gave me life, and another who raised me in silence through her presence, without condition. I cast her aside. I insulted her. I drove her out of my house, out of my heart. The room fell utterly silent. But by some miracle, she forgave me. Not because I deserved it. But because her heart was big enough to understand that sometimes, we only grow up after losing what matters most. He turned slightly toward Rose. She's sitting here today. And this fund doesn't just carry her name, it carries her spirit, a life that never demanded, never blamed, never sought status. But was full of love. Applause broke out. Quiet at first, then swelling throughout the hall. Rose sat motionless, lips slightly parted. Her eyes glistened. The frame in her hand trembled slightly, but her gaze shone bright like the sun outside. After the press event, many came to shake hands, take photos with Rose. One elderly woman named Margaret, 76, who had worked for 5 families over 40 years, cried as she hugged Rose. Thank you, Miss Rose. Thank you for being our voice. Rose, deeply moved, squeezed her hand. I'm just one small life, Mrs. Margaret. But now, I don't feel alone anymore. Andrew came over to join them. Mrs. Margaret, starting next month, the fund will cover your rent. Margaret teared up. Even my own son hasn't done that. Rose held Andrew's hand and whispered. You're doing what your father once dreamed of, but couldn't. Andrew replied softly, because I carry the strength of both of you. A few weeks later, media across the country reported on the Eternal Rose Fund, calling it, a light in the heart of a cold New York. News stations ran special reports, interviewed Rose, and invited Andrew onto talk shows to discuss chosen family and late found redemption. On one appearance on Crossroads, the host asked Rose, do you resent Andrew for the past? Rose shook her head. No. Because I don't want to carry resentment to the end of my life. And now, how do you see yourself? Rose smiled, eyes slightly misty. I'm the honorary mother of a man who once lost his way. Andrew sat beside her. On live TV, he held her hand, gently squeezing it. And I promise. I won't lose my way again. That evening, back at the mansion, Rose sat on the balcony, looking out at the shimmering city lights. Andrew brought her a cup of tea and sat down beside her. Do you remember the first time you met me? He asked. Very clearly. Rose smiled. A 5-year-old boy, lips pressed tight, refusing to let me touch him, secretly watching me peel an apple. I'm sorry it took me 20 years to understand who you were. It's all right. I lived long enough to see you change. I'm going to take you traveling. You once said you wanted to see Yosemite. My eyes are weak, my legs aren't what they used to be, but my heart still wants to. Then we'll go. I'll carry you, if I have to. Rose laughed. Don't make me cry tonight. No, you have to laugh. Because I won't let you cry anymore. Months later, at the opening ceremony of the first nursing home named Rose Walker House, Andrew spoke before a crowd of over 200. People often say housekeepers are invisible. I say they are the silent backbone of society. Rose taught me that through her silence and enduring presence. He brought Rose on stage, her hand still holding the same small photo of the boy who once pushed her away. The whole room rose in applause. Soft light filled the space. One morning, Rose sat in the reading room, holding a small letter. She handed it to Andrew. "This is a letter I once wrote to you, back when I lived in that old boarding house. But I never gave it to you." Andrew opened it. Inside, in simple handwriting. "If one day you want to hug me, I'll open my arms. If one day you want to call me mother, I'll hear it with all my heart." He looked up. His voice broke. "Mom." Rose didn't speak. She opened her arms. Andrew leaned into her shoulder like a child. Sunlight poured through the window. In that moment, there was no more bitterness. Only rebirth. This story is a powerful reminder of silence, misunderstanding, and the cost of neglect. Andrew had spent nearly a lifetime only to realize that love doesn't always speak loudly and that those who sacrifice the most are often the ones we ignore. The greatest lesson is this. Don't wait until it's too late to say you're sorry. Don't let a twisted past shape your future. Forgiveness doesn't just free others, it saves you from a lifetime of regret.
If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.